Let's go to the next part here. Really interesting event, the Faith and Family Summit, sponsored by Blaze Media, which they got a big coup for them, actually, considering that Glenn Beck is their major media personality. They're like, no, let's get Tucker Carlson, actually, to do it. So Tucker, I guess on the heels of firing from Fox News, got to sit down with some of the GOP candidates. There were two particular exchanges that Tucker really decided to go in against. One was former Vice President Mike Pence, not on Stop the Steal, but on Ukraine and on religious freedom inside of Ukraine. Number two also was with Tim Scott, also hitting him for his stance on Ukraine, kind of holding him to the Tucker more nationalist standard and the more Trumpian standard on the issue. Here's what he had to say.
You are distressed that the Ukrainians don't have enough American tanks. Every city in the United States has become much worse over the past 3 years. Yeah. Drive around. There's not one city that's gotten better in the United States. And it's visible. Our economy has degraded. The suicide rate has jumped. Public filth and disorder and crime have exponentially increased. And yet, your concern is that the Ukrainians, a country most people can't find on a map, who've received tens of billions of U.S. tax dollars, don't have enough tanks. I think it's a fair question to ask, where's the concern for the United States in that?
Well, it's not my concern. Tucker, I've heard that routine from you before, but that's not my concern. I'm running for president of the United States because I think this country's in a lot of trouble. I think Joe Biden has weakened America at home and abroad. And as President of the United States, we're going to restore law and order in our cities. We're going to secure our border. We're going to get this economy moving again. And we're going to make sure that we have men and women on our courts at every level that will stand for the right to life and defend all the God-given liberties enshrined in our Constitution. Anybody that says that we can't be the leader of the free world and solve our problems at home has a pretty small view of the greatest nation on earth. We can do both.
Tim Scott was also pressed there on Ukraine. Krystal, I'm pretty sure he meant to say that's not my concern whenever it came to Ukraine doesn't have enough tanks, but it's a pretty bad enough look whenever you're being pressed there on the actual whether America's cities and they should be receiving some sort of increase. But this goes to show, I think, that Tucker did remain one of the only forces that was willing to press mainstream Republicans, I don't know from what direction, but from, I guess, a more anti-war direction, more skeptical direction whenever it came to aid towards Ukraine. And that this is a very rare line of argumentation that we have seen yet for some of these candidates. So I was interested, actually, to see from Mike Pence. I actually think it would be a bigger deal if Mike Pence was doing better in this race. He didn't actually. I will say this. Tucker was, I think, a lot kinder to Ron DeSantis, even though DeSantis has been a little bit more wishy-washy on the issue of Ukraine.
Interesting.
So I did certainly take note of that.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I guess here's my sense of how the Ukrainian war will play with the Republican primary voters. I think there is a chunk of them that this is a really important issue for them. And that, basically all of the people who will be voting on Ukraine war in the Republican primary hold the Trump position and hold the Tucker position. So that's why there's, in a space like this is like niche activist kind of a space. So you can't take too much from it and you can't extrapolate too much from it to the broader GOP base. But I do think to the extent that there is a group of voters in the Republican primary who are voting on Ukraine, and I do think that group exists, I think they all have the Donald Trump position. So if you aren't clearly in that position, you're basically cutting yourself off from whatever 10% or 15%. I'm just pulling these numbers out of thin air of the GOP base that is really, really focused on that issue. So overall, though, the polling from the even from the Republican base is fairly mixed still on Ukraine. It's not the overwhelming numbers that it feels like when you're watching that audience react. I think there's more of an issue Mike Pence has a lot of issues in this race, but I think more of the issue for him is he just feels very sort of weak. It feels easy for him to be humiliated. It feels like he was humiliated by Trump for 4 years of the presidency, and he doesn't have the kind of fighter strong, whatever vibes that it feels to me like the base is looking for.
I think you're right. And, you know, I think, look, I mean, I've always said this about Ukraine. We spend a lot of time covering Ukraine here because we think it's important to, like, the geopolitical situation.
Yeah.
But, like, neither of us, Krystal, would ever delude ourselves into thinking, like, yeah, this is the most popular issue. I can guarantee you, if we wanted to be, quote, more popular, we would spend way less time actually talking about Ukraine. In the allusion to what we were talking about in our previous block about people who actually consume politics, last time I checked, foreign affairs ranks at 0% in terms of the most important issue for people whenever they vote. So once again, just always try and internalize like where you are versus the general population. Most people don't think about Ukraine to the extent that they do. They're like, yeah, we should help them, but they don't know anything about cluster munitions or anything about what's actually going on there. They couldn't tell you what Crimea is. They could barely point to Ukraine on a map. They think Putin is bad. That's basically the extent to which they think about the conflict. So whenever it does come to this, it probably is more important in these types of interviews for pressing them on the policy that they may enact whenever they are president. And then second, as you said, to the extent that a GOP primary voter is thinking about this at all, they are only thinking about this as Pence taking a different position than Trump. They're going to think of it as Trump-coded, not really about Ukraine and the aid itself. Although maybe, you know, some people, whenever they're looking at this, same I really think with Tim Scott. So it's an interesting issue always to think and to look at, you know, politically in terms of how it will actually code in the primary. But overall, I don't think it's going to be the most important issue. It really, Trump is the center of gravity. That said, you can see Tucker did talk about his, what people are calling the defenstration of Mike Pence there on the stage at a Turning Point Action Conference, and the crowd actually went wild in terms of the pressing of Mike Pence and about humiliating him on the stage. Here's the response that they gave.
I won't attack anyone on personal grounds or by name. It's tempting. I will say it's tempting. Whoever said do it, you're the devil on my shoulder. Do it! I've spent my whole life. No. But if I could make some general observations, which I think are more edifying than just like savaging Mike Pence, I think, which I'm not going to do, because that would be wrong. And it would be wrong because it's too easy. And the easy things are not rewarding, are they? You don't feel good when you beat your 5-year-old in soccer or ping pong. Like what?
The crowd has no love there for Mike Pence. And look, let's be clear. It's a Turning Point Action Conference. These are all Charlie Kirk people. These are all MAGA people. So they're all like predisposed, you know, not the kindest audience, I guess, towards Mike Pence anyways. But, you know, it does bear it out in terms of the way that a lot of people do feel about Mike Pence in the primary.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the vibes during that 2016 GOP primary where, listen, it was fun to watch Trump savage.
Yeah, it is fun. It's funny.
Jeb Bush and these other, Marco Rubio and these other, like, weird losers. And, you know, that's how the Republican base feels about Mike Pence. Some segment of them were literally running around the Capitol calling for him to be hung on January 6th. So not a lot of love for him there. And so, yeah, they're enjoying watching his moment of public humiliation. And, you know, even though, listen, Mike Pence in his answer to Tucker, I think he was talking about, like, my concern is not that there aren't enough American tanks in Ukraine, but he really could have done a better job acknowledging that, yes, I think there's a lot of pain in America that needs to be addressed. And he actually, in a lot of ways, Tucker gave him a wide open chance.
He really did.
To pivot off of Ukraine, an issue where he knows with that audience in particular, he's going to be at odds with them, to here's what I want to do with regard to, you know, the domestic economy, and here's what I want to do with regard to my plan for revitalizing these cities, or whatever it is that Mike Pence wants to do. I really don't even know. But it was actually a great political opening for him to be able to pivot to some of those areas where he might be more in step with the Republican base. And so it also just shows a level of, you know, political inartfulness and inability to move, think on your feet, be nimble in a difficult situation ultimately.
Yep.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.